I want to say which league is better because we were asking that question. Is it better? I don't know. My argument would be that I think the tough guys could learn to play soft, but I don't know if the soft guys could learn to play tough.
All right, man. Well, we're talking all things basketball today, and just basically just trying to figure out how we can compare eras, if we should compare eras, which one may be the best if we do compare them. So let's take a look at this thing. Thanks for joining us, John, man. How you doing?
Doing great. Happy to be here.
Good, good. So as we take a look at this, comparing the eras of basketball, for me, I mean, I'm a guy that says, if you can play basketball, you can play basketball. I don't care what era it's in. Now, obviously, things have changed a lot from the 50s to now, so the dynamics are different. But I'm a person that says, you know what? A guy that was really good in the 50s, his game would have evolved into what basketball is today. I think people today look at it as like there's no way they could play in the 50s because they act like their game wouldn't have evolved. But tell me what you think about that, John.
Well, I think you have to look at not just the game. You have to also look at even the technology, the shoes. I mean, guys were walking around wearing Chuck Taylors.
Absolutely.
And they were playing back. The shoe technology, night and day different. In the 69 finals, when the Lakers played against the Boston Celtics, Wilt Chamberlain had a strained muscle in his leg. They used Freon gas on his leg on the court. You understand how insane that is. If you did that today, it's an OSHA violation.
Yes.
In any place you can get respiratory infection and you can die from that. Wilt Chamberlain couldn't continue for the rest of the game. They couldn't figure out why. They gave him Freon gas on his leg. The medical technology, injuries like Klay Thompson had would have ended his career in the 60s. He'd be done. He would never come back. So when you say that these guys couldn't play today, I find that to be absurd because it's the evolution of the game. They started out here and they progressed to where they are today.
Correct.
They didn't just arrive and fall on the mountaintop. They arrived there from the progression of that game. I don't think anyone can tell me that Wilt Chamberlain would be better than Rudy Gobert today, or that Jokic is so much better than Hakeem Olajuwon, for example. I think that the eras of the game transcend, and some players are just amazing basketball players, and that's all they are.
Absolutely. People are just amazing basketball players. I like the comparison of Joker and Hakeem. You can't tell me that Hakeem Olajuwon would not be able to play in this day and age. Anybody who says that is absolutely insane.
Go watch Hakeem block Michael Jordan's game-winning shots twice. He did it. Jordan, he played the perimeter. He could do it all. Hakeem was a man. He was top 10 in steals in the league when he played. I mean, absolutely. At 6'10", that's incredible.
Incredible. So when it comes down to brass tacks, I know you got a lot to say about eras and who could play and why they could play, man. And that's why we appreciate you coming on, man. Tell me what you think as far as comparing eras and why you think that you shouldn't be able to. I think differently. I think you can compare them because I just give guys credit that played previously. I give them the credit for being able to evolve their game. But I know you don't think so. Tell me why, man.
I think it's impossible to compare, for example, Wilt Chamberlain got 55 rebounds against Bill Russell. Now, that's just insane. He played head-to-head with Bill Russell, got 55 rebounds. But at the time when he did that in the league, there were only 12 teams.
Right.
So it would be kind of similar to like what the WNBA is today. It had to evolve. Again, the league had to evolve. But to say Wilt Chamberlain couldn't play in the NBA today, absurd.
Right.
I think he'd be just as dominant of a rebounder. He just might not get 50 rebounds. He might get 25. Right. He might get 28. I mean, Enes Kanter got 28 rebounds in a game. I don't think you're going to say that Enes Kanter is a better basketball player than Wilt Chamberlain.
No.
So that's kind of the argument that I mean. Can you compare those eras? You can compare the talent level of individuals, but you can't compare necessarily the eras together because they're different. You dominate a period of your era, and then you can dominate a period where you're not as dominant. It doesn't mean that you're not good. It's just the game is kind of changing a little bit. Mm-hmm. We kind of saw that with Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan isn't any less of a player when he's playing with the Wizards. He's just old. Right. The game didn't change. His body just changed.
Right.
When you watch Wilt Chamberlain playing against Kareem Abdul-Jabbar in the early 70s, Wilt Chamberlain is still an amazing player. I mean, he played the Western Conference Final with a broken hand and literally was blocking Kareem's skyhook, which, as everyone knows, is unblockable.
Mm-hmm.
And he was taking it down. That was great basketball.
Right.
That doesn't mean that you can't tell me again that Wilt Chamberlain couldn't block a shot today in the NBA, or that Kareem's skyhook wouldn't work today. Those are still fundamentals of basketball. We watched Tim Duncan, was not a very athletic guy, but was fundamentally sound, dominate the league for a good period of years.
Right.
So you're saying that Tim Duncan couldn't play and not be overly athletic, but these guys today can only be athletic guys? Well, there's a guy named Luka that's kind of tearing apart the league right now. So why isn't he there? Why isn't he athletic? You can't tell me that the fundamentals don't matter, because they do. So I think the fundamentals of basketball matter, but you can't say that an era, for example, if Luka were to play in a league where he got hand checked, would he be able to score as many points as he would be able to score?
Right.
If he played in a league without a three-point outlet and he had a shot blocker in the paint when he goes to the low post, does he score the same amount of points? That's why the eras are hard to compare, but the fundamentals are always there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. My thing when it goes talking about Luka is they say, man, he does this, does that, but Larry Bird somehow wouldn't be able to play in the NBA today. I don't understand how that could even come out of somebody's mouth.
I would ask them this: have they ever watched Alex English play? Because I thought Alex English was a highly underrated player. Really solid mid-court game. Just guy mid-range would dominate everyone. He wasn't flashy. He wasn't in a lot of playoff games, but the man just averaged 27 points for the majority of his career. He just was a solid player. Really good player. George Gervin, guys like that all the time. You can't tell me those guys are that much worse than James Harden or any of the other guys that are out here playing. Like, how can they were played defense as well back then? You had to. You couldn't not play defense. So I think it's a cop out to just kind of say these are the best players that have ever been. I don't believe that. I refuse to believe that.
Nope, I don't either. Here's one thing that I always talk about is guys back then, everybody wasn't a superior athlete like guys are today. Guys today are superior athletes and they're skilled at certain things. Guys back then were basketball players. And there is a huge difference between being athletic playing basketball or being an actual basketball player. Basketball IQ comes into it. It's like you mentioned, Alex English. The mid-range. I mean, the mid-range is not a part of most people's basketball games today.
Right.
Then people lived on it. It's just a philosophy of basketball.
DeMar DeRozan makes a pretty good career out of it, though.
Absolutely he does. Absolutely he does just fine playing that way. And nobody complains.
And I don't think you can look at the intangibles of the game and say that, okay, this guy would not have adjusted his game to what's going on here. It's kind of like whenever you say the greatest of all time and people say, like, could LeBron James have played in this era? Could he have done that? Yeah, he would probably play like a guy played in that era because he would adjust. But you can't tell me like Bob McAdoo in his prime wasn't going to walk in and he would still be scoring 30 points a game. McAdoo was incredible in the 70s. I mean, Pistol Pete still had handles. His handles are still handles. They're still going to be there. Charles Barkley was the most unathletic man to ever play basketball. I don't know. You see, he came to the league. He was 280 pounds, 6'5". It doesn't make any sense.
Well, and Barkley was athletic. He was just overweight.
But he was just. But I'm saying, if prototype of what you would look at for an athlete today, you don't think he'd be able to do what he was able to do. But Barkley could go in the paint, cover Shaq if he had to.
Absolutely.
It was amazing to watch this guy. And it's like he played bigger than he was. He played power forward at 6'5".
Yeah.
That's insane today. And people are like, oh, he can't shoot. Barkley had an outside shot too.
Yeah,
he was a pretty well-rounded player. But again, to say that he wouldn't be able to last in today's league, I can't buy that argument. I think the comparing of eras is hard. It is hard also with the rule changes, which is another thing that we kind of touched on before. You and
that's what I wanted to get into. Yep.
The rule changes are really difficult because when you look at the rules of how they change, for example, in the 80s, the original three-point line is at 23 feet 9 inches. Right. Well, now it's at 22 feet. So when guys are hitting threes, like a guy has a three-point shot, before 1994, they weren't really hitting that shot anymore. Right. It was a little bit different. But the crazy part is, and I actually wrote some stats down here, you know that the average, the NBA average for a three-point shot in 1994 was 33.6%. The average after moving it to 22.9 inches was 35.9%, and today it's 36.9%. It hasn't really changed that much. The skill level from the 90s to today isn't that much different. They're taking a higher frequency of those shots,
Right.
but it's not a great bit of difference. I think one of the things that you have to look at in the rules for everything is Wilt Chamberlain played with a different set of rules than
Yeah.
everyone else played with. International ball is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And you saw the U.S. national team kind of struggle with that in the Olympics when they got there and they're like, oh, wait, I don't get a foul. Wait, the guy's hand checking me and I'm not getting a call. Or this is when I go in the paint and I get bumped. Yeah, that's how international ball is played. It's
Mm-hmm.
totally different than what we play here. The key is wider. They widened out the key, changed the lane assignments on free throws. Things had to change because they made the game different. Today we have the same 3-point line as international ball, but there are different rules that we play with.
Mm-hmm.
When Jordan would go to the paint and go and dunk, there was no restricted area. There's usually a big man parked right underneath the paint, and he's going to stay there. And he's going to stay there and patrol that middle, and you're going to go in the paint, you're going to get whacked. That was what's going to happen. Today, when I see a guy do that, you're like, oh, okay, well, he goes in the paint and he dunks on someone. When Ja Morant takes off and does that, Patrick Ewing or Alonzo Mourning aren't waiting under the paint to knock you to the ground when you do that.
Exactly.
It's a different game. But if you go and look at how the guys after 2004, when they allowed the implemented the zone defense, they kind of tried to get it more guard-friendly league. Watch the guys that exploded in the league. Steve Nash suddenly became an awesome player because people were playing zone defense a little bit more on him, and he was able to kind of slip by, use his pick and roll a little bit better. Kobe exploded. Kobe loved the fact you're going to play soft defense on him.
Yeah.
Tracy McGrady, all those guys looked a lot better once they altered those rules a little bit to favor the guard play. So comparing those eras, do you think that Oscar Robinson couldn't have done the same thing when he was getting triple doubles in the 70s?
Right.
Yeah, he could have done it. It's not the same. It's not a knock on him. We have to just realize that basketball is still a beautiful game. And if you understand that the fundamentals of the game are still maintained, look at a guy's fundamentals, not his athletic ability. Because
absolutely.
David Thompson and Dominique Wilkins were pretty athletic. No one has a vertical jump close to what Dominique Wilkins had or what David Thompson had. The only three guys that are highest in the league in league history are Michael Jordan, Wilt Chamberlain, and David Thompson at 48-inch verticals, which is insane.
Yeah.
If you consider that LeBron James has a 41-inch vertical, Dominique Wilkins had a 42-inch vertical, Dwaynewade had a 36, and I think Kobe had a 38. I think that when you think about that, the vertical that you think an entire 10 inches different, Wilt Chamberlain could jump 10 inches higher than Kobe Bryant at 7'2". It's insane. So the athletic ability, the guys aren't more athletic now. I think that you just have you have a larger array of athletes. Population of our country is different. We have a more international game. So more guys are coming over here that may not have gotten a shot, get more shots in the NBA. So you have a more variety of talent, but I don't think it's more talented. I think the league is still just as talented. Guys played ball just in a different way. That's all.
Well, one thing is I think it's positionless basketball where, in the 80s and 90s, a power forward wasn't very valuable. They were basically enforcers or goons is what they called them,
Right.
Guys that were out there just to cause havoc, get rebounds, play defense. And now those guys are expected to do a little bit more, but they're still, it's more of the pivot man now. It's more of
Right.
the 5-man, stretch 5 or stretch 4, whichever one you want to call it. That's where the difference is for me, is because there's no big man, which I think we got to get back to using a big man. It's insane that we just refuse to use guys that are that tall, the arms are that long, and can score easier
It makes the game more interesting, in my opinion. Having battles in the paint,
yes,
it makes the game more gritty. Trust me, I love the outside shooting aspect of basketball. The guys hitting shots from half court, it's cool. But I miss the old watching, like I said, Hakeem Olajuwon, watching his footwork. Hakeem was smaller than Shaq, but he outplayed him. He outplayed him using his footwork. It was amazing watching this guy because you had to use actual skill. And the big man in the paint doesn't exist anymore. Everything is a jump shot, not even from mid-range. We're talking literally everything's from 3 or drive in and dunk. It's
Correct.
either at 0 feet or 23 feet. There's nothing else in between. And they got to somehow, the NBA rule committee has to get together and somehow fix that because it's robbing a lot of great basketball from happening, in my opinion.
Well,
and I want that to come back.
Part of it is freedom of movement.
True.
In the 80s, again, in the 90s. And I'm not talking about, the football aspect and guys just getting bludgeoned to death. What I'm talking about is guys running off screens. If you tried to run off a screen, there was going to be a center or a power forward that would take a step out, put their forearm out, and you could either run into it or you had to run around it. I go,
Right.
they don't allow that anymore. They allow the freedom of movement. That's a real thing that people underestimate. I mean, freedom of movement, that's a real thing that
Oh, it
guys
does.
didn't get the luxury in the 80s and 90s of doing. Hand checking is a real thing. I know there's so many people what are you talking about hand checking? I'm like, have you ever tried to drive on somebody that can put their hand on your hip? I go, it's not that easy. Why do you think guys used to slap their hands away? It isn't for the fun of it. It's because, hey, these guys can control. Look at how big somebody's hand is, and they've got that on your hip and can control you for a second or two. That's all it is. It's not like they had it on you for 24 seconds. Just give me a second or two so I can keep you in front of me. That matters.
I also think that a lot of the arguments and things that I hear come from people if you've never really played basketball. Like, what I mean by not like, I mean like we used to play the pickup game. There used to be hoop it up tournaments. People used to play pickup basketball like it was nothing. It was just all the time. People don't really play pickup basketball at that anymore. So when I tell someone like, oh, you ever hand check someone, they're not really even sure what hand checking really is sometimes.
Right.
They don't think they understand it. They don't understand how even if a cornerback does that to a wide receiver in football, it's the same thing. I'm stopping your movement and directing where you're going to go. But in basketball, when I have to put the ball down and dribble while I'm doing that, it's a game changer.
Yes.
So not being able to do that, you can't tell me again that Rick Barry couldn't shoot the ball just as well if he had a 3-point line like they are today. He would love this game. This would be his. He would be in heaven during this.
Absolutely.
But it's the fun parts of what I miss. I remember like 03 Tim Duncan. I'm not even a Spurs fan, but 03 Tim Duncan was like the scariest power forward I've ever seen in basketball. You couldn't stop 03 Tim Duncan. Just insane. You can go back and look at his stats.
Yeah.
Tim Duncan would go in the paint and you would battle and you would watch Shaq and him go at it. And David Robinson was on his way out, but he was still there. It was such a great bit of basketball to watch those guys in the paint literally battle, because that's when people say like, it's a man's game. When you go in the paint and there's 4 guys that are 7 feet tall trying to block up and put a rubber ball in a hole, and everybody's trying to block it, that's a battle. That's a battle for 48 minutes.
Absolutely.
So when you're playing that game, that's a beautiful game to me. I love the 3-point shots. It's all cool. They had that. Steve Kerr could shoot the ball. Steve Kerr wasn't a superstar because that's not how they scored in the 90s.
No.
But in today's game, Steve Kerr will be a high paid player.
Absolutely.
I mean, but it's not. But it's a different game now. Back then, It was a lot tougher. So if you want to say which league is better, because we were asking that question, is it better? I don't know. My argument would be that I think the tough guys could learn to play soft, but I don't know if the soft guys could learn to play tough. And if you were to compare the two, I've seen one play the other, but I don't know if you weren't hand checking Michael Jordan, what would he do? If you weren't hand checking Larry Bird, well, how would he play?
Yeah.
I mean, hand checking has been banned, but it's not been enforced so heavily as it is today. Today, it's instant foul. You put your hand up there at the foul.
It's a foul.
But I mean, go back and look at the '91 finals, Lakers and Bulls. Scottie Pippen hand checks Magic Johnson
all the way up and down the court.
literally puts he's leaning on him while running.
Yes.
And he just sits there the entire time. And Magic has to turn his back and back down the court, almost using up a lot of shot clock to do that. And people don't understand how much of a disadvantage that is today. If you did that to a lot of point guards today, they'd be like, what's going on? Like, why am I not getting a call? And you can do that in international ball. And that's something that I think it's really interesting to see how that'll develop. Personally, I hope the NBA goes back to get a little bit more paint action. I'd love to see what Giannis could do in the post against, say, like somebody like Cat in Minnesota. I would love to see that. I think that those would be great battles that we could have happen. But they're not going to happen anytime soon with the rules the way they are. Yeah,
the rules the way they are have literally taken away. I shouldn't even say taken away. If you wanted to use a big man, if we wanted to say, Giannis, go to the post. Go post up a guy and go get us a bucket. You can do that. But it's so much one-on-one, pick and roll, which I understand pick and roll is a big thing. But, hey, go get in the post. Go get us a bucket when we need you to get us a bucket. Well, you just want to run a play, get you free, maybe set a side-to-side screen even with the guard screening your guy. Let's get you in the post and get a basket. And there's just not enough of that going on right now.
I
The
miss
game
it,
is
man.
played so far out. It takes away some of that physicality that I think a lot of people actually like, to be honest with you. I think they like the physicality, but it's been taken away with the 3-point shot, the emphasis on the 3-point shot. I think you can do both. I
Right.
really do think you can do both. I just think that we've gone so overboard with the 3-point shot that now we're going to have to start, okay, let's reel it back in here and let's
Balance.
realize we can play physical basketball as well as have this 3-point shot encompassed in our game to make the game even better.
Agreed. 100%. And you can't, like, to me, it's like you used to watch you used to watch the Spurs teams. Remember Bruce Bowen? Bruce Bowen had that great corner three shot he used to always hit. It was like Bruce Bowen was never going to destroy you or, like, go off for 50 points. It just wasn't going to happen. But Tim Duncan probably was the paint. And it was like this balance, this kind of art they created where it's like you always look like Tony Parker wasn't the most athletic guy, but he went out there and they all played defense. They played a lot of team ball.
Right.
The argument I've heard against the post game is that it becomes a one-man show. It's a one-on-one game.
Doesn't have to
and
be.
I think that the part of the coolest parts of basketball, the greatest stories in basketball you watch, are kind of little one-on-one battles. They're not necessarily when Karl Malone and Dennis Rodman are battling each other in the paint. Is that a one-on-one game? Because they're not really worried about Michael Jordan at that point. No, they're worried about he's his best scorer. We're going to shut him down.
Right.
We're going to do this. Now, that creates great basketball to me. That's how it works. Can you D this guy up? Can you stop him? Can you shut him down in the paint? Or is he going to run all over your team? It's a team sport, but you have an individual task. I think that's great basketball. Some people like this kind of fluid, everybody like, oh, he hit that great shot. He just got a good pick and got an open look. I mean, To me, watching Steph Curry run around and dodge and get everybody throw picks for him until he can get a ball and shoot a shot with half a second. It's fun every now and then, but sometimes if he's having an off night, that's just a lot of rebounds in a boring game of basketball. And you're like, come on, man, somebody drive in here and dunk. You get tired of it.
Well, the thing that funny that you say that is because that is literally the argument of people that talk about basketball in the 60s and 70s is that the pace was so fast and, this is why these guys got all these rebounds because nobody could shoot. Well, the same goes true here is when guys have bad shooting nights, and that happens more times than not, there's all these rebounds. It makes the game ugly. I'm like, versus going inside, you know what? I don't care what anybody says. I actually had a person argue with me that told me that an open 25-foot shot was a better shot than somebody shooting a contested 5-footer. I'm like, have you ever played a game of basketball in your life by saying that? It's those kinds of arguments, John, that I'm talking about, that people are just like, nope, and was serious. I'm like, are you kidding me? So you're telling me you would rather take a 25-footer wide open than a contested 5-footer?
I think this goes back to your original comment about the fundamentals versus the kind of flash in the pan we kind of see now today.
Yes.
Where a fundamental shot, like if you go out and tell anyone on the Boston Celtics 86 team is considered one of the best defensive teams ever.
Right.
They could not stop Kareem in his hook shot. They couldn't stop it. He's contested on every shot. He's going to be contested, but he's unstoppable because his fundamentals were sound.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't matter necessarily shooting a contested shot might be dumb, but if you are completely sure of your fundamentals, you can't stop that player. No. And that's when I think the game is beautiful. When Michael Jordan crossed someone over and he did that little fade, lean back, when he would lean back, you knew right then as you were watching, you got to stop. Okay, what is he about to do? And as a fan, you don't know what he's going to do. He's not going to pass it. He's going to take this guy to the hole. He could sit back and fade away. He could drive to his right, drive to his left. That's fun. I grew up watching Kobe and Michael Jordan do this all the time. Now, guys, it's like, oh, he's defended. Okay, once the defender's there, he's going to pass out. They're rotating the ball. Okay, now they're just throwing junk up because the shot clock's going down, and there we go. Turnover, and it's going back. That's not the same game to me. It's not that I'm knocking it. I think the NBA is interesting, but I don't think it's as fun as it was when I used to watch it and maybe that's me getting older, but it's not as fun anymore watching the game to me.
The thing about it, and I think, it kind of depends on who's watching it, because clearly, 18 to 25-year-old is going to think that anything in the NBA right now is the best thing smoking. We're a little older, so we have a different perspective on things. I look at it as, you know what, I just want basketball. I just want real basketball. I don't care what rules you put in there. Well, actually, I take that back. I do care. I want it to be real basketball. I want defense to be allowed to be played. And I know they say that, you want scoring because that's what people want and that's what brings the money in. And I understand all that. But when you take an aspect away, it's kind of the same thing in the NFL. You take defense away. Well, defense is part of basketball too. And they seem to have taken that away. And guys don't really care about defense that much anymore. You're going to have your defensive stoppers. You're going to have some of those. There were a lot of guys that could be two-way players. And that's what they call them now, two-way players. Well, there's few and far between. Or 3 and D.
That was a player. That was
right.
A player. If you didn't play defense, you weren't going to see the court.
Correct.
And now today, if a guy can play defense and offense, it's like, oh, that's a basketball player. That's what you're supposed to do. And the other thing that drives me nuts is, I think right now we'll probably experience this in our lifetime. In about 10 or 15 years, some kid will walk up and tell you that, well, Kobe Bryant wasn't that good. Because when he looks on TV and the talking heads on ESPN, all the other sports channels will pop up and they'll say, like, well, his stats will go X, Y, and Z.
Right.
But you don't understand how a guy watching a game, you could go to an arena, pay your ticket, sit down, and you had no idea if Kobe was going to take off and drop 50 or just dominate a game. You had no idea what was going to happen, but that's why you went there.
Right.
Today, a guy might say, well, I look at Kobe. He's not that athletic. He doesn't have this, and he missed a lot of shots. Because if you look at stats, that's what you're going to see. But you don't realize how the guy dominated the game. So today, when we go and talk about guys in the 50s and 60s, sometimes even the 70s, like Dr. J, people just leave him out. Dr. J dominated games like that. The other thing I see guys that they don't do anymore is ball control. Guys don't palm the ball. You got a big hand, you go and palm the ball.
Yeah.
The control of the ball had a way of doing it. It's a fundamental thing that guys don't do today. And you see a lot of guys that's like, man, he lost the ball because the guy touched it. But in the 60s and 70s, guys controlled the ball because you turn the ball over too much, you're going to hit the bench really quick.
Absolutely.
But it's a different level of intensity that comes when you bring in defense. The offense gets more intensive as well. So when a guy's like, hey, a guy just dropped 60 points, it's really impressive when a guy drops 60 points when everybody's playing defense. But, when Devin Booker can go out one night and hit 60, and then Donovan Mitchell hits 70, and then Luka hits 60, and this whatever, it becomes commonplace. And it becomes less valuable when a guy hits 60 in a league where no one plays defense than in a league where everybody literally prides himself on shutting down someone, and you go out and hit 50 points. That's impressive. That legitimately is impressive.
And the thing about it is, and we'll wrap it up, is they're not allowed to play the type of defense anymore. That's where, and I know we touched on that earlier.
And let's be clear, I'm not talking about just, Detroit Pistons beating guys up.
No, absolutely not.
I'm talking about, for example, Kawhi Leonard when he was playing unlike LeBron James. What Kawhi Leonard did to LeBron James, and go look at his stats, he really didn't completely shut him down. He just made life more difficult for him, which is what most defenders do.
Correct.
And go look in the playoffs with Dennis Rodman versus Karl Malone. He still averaged 30 points in that series. But he didn't get the buckets when he needed them to. The game will still be entertaining. The stats will still be there. But the interesting portion of the game is a strategy of, in the critical moments, can you stop this guy when he does it? The great ones you can't stop. And the good ones who might never make to that legendary status, they do get shut down. And that's the battle. That's the chess match we're having. And I think that's what makes it fun.
Well, and I think people like to see it too. People like to see people get stopped. They like to see the competition. When it's all one-sided, there's not a whole lot of competition that's going on with basketball. And that's 100%. Where the people get frustrated, is because they come to be entertained, but we also come to see the competition. And you don't get that because the rules have been taken away from the defensive side of it to not allow it, man. So, well, I appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. Thank you.
Always happy
energetic
to be here.
Conversation. We will absolutely have you back on and discuss even more topics, man, because we're just building this thing. So I appreciate it, Jon. Thank you, man, for joining in.
Happy to be here, sir. See you next
Alrighty.
time.